Hi, my name is Aleksandar Gargenta, and today we're breaking open the CyanogenMod project with Chris Soyars, who is responsible for their infrastructure. Okay, so you obviously are now a recent resident of San Francisco,
Yep.
so we're lucky to have you. This is one of our first episodes, and we're hoping to do a lot more of these. So how do you like San Francisco? Let's start with that.
I'm loving it so far.
Yeah?
Yep.
And so do you find a lot of folks in the Cyanogen kind of community in the area as well, like as your users or other folks that contribute to the project?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a ton. Most people that I've talked to, once I mention it, they've heard of the project, which is pretty cool. And I've never been anywhere else where you can be walking down the street and just hear a conversation that you can kind of relate to.
Nice.
So it's been pretty fun so far.
Nice, I love it as well. So before we get into, I guess, the details, let's start with what is Cyanogen to you and I guess, to your team.
So we consider ourselves a fork of Android, or at least I do at this point. We basically take the open source version of Android and we try to get it to run on as many devices as we can. Usually carriers want you to buy the next latest and greatest phone once the older ones have kind of, stopped selling. So we try to keep the phones and devices up to date with the latest version of Android, even if the carrier doesn't really care about that phone anymore. Don't want to say care about, but they've dropped support for it. I think a good example is the T-Mobile G1, which we kept alive probably through Eclair, I believe, maybe even a little bit further. And that never really got an update past Donut from T-Mobile
I
or
remember I have a couple
HTC.
of those.
So, yeah.
And so that kind of brings me to my next question. So what are the goals? Obviously, keeping the old hardware alive is a noble goal, and it makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, we're just creating a bunch of junk all the time as a society. So what other goals do you guys have? Obviously, there's the features, there's the overclocking, there's better kind of apps, there's a lot of customization, custom permissions. So can you tell us a little bit about how do you, first of all, come up with these goals, and then what are those?
So I think the goals are kind of driven by just whoever's involved in the project. One of our biggest goals is to have CyanogenMod running on as many devices as possible, and that's just always kind of been a goal ever since we started getting more people involved and more devices on the list of supported devices. It's actually one of our biggest challenges too, keeping the code bases all clean and separate. But besides that, we do care quite a bit about just having a large feature set. Most of our users are power users, so they require a little bit of knowledge to actually get CyanogenMod running on their phone. So we want to give them as many just bells and whistles and knobs that they can tweak as possible, but also maintaining a good user experience with that.
And so these bells and whistles, I mean, do you expose things just because you can? Or do you expose things because you feel like there's an itch to scratch? Like, someone at CyanogenMod wants to be able to overclock their device, and that's how the overclocking feature gets added. So, like, how do you come up with these?
It's usually how it starts. Is somebody has an idea, oh, I want to overclock. Okay, well, let's make it happen. Another big feature that we had was quiet hours, where you can kind of set your phone to not make any sound, or just more tweaks around how the notification system works, time-based, and I believe that was somebody's idea that just got implemented. And usually, as long as the feature doesn't interfere with anything too low level, we'll take it as as long as it's stable and well thought out and developed well.
And how do you integrate the features? So speaking of kind of well thought out. So so obviously you can just provide a dump of all the features, like a bunch of checkboxes, list selectors, and so on and so on. Like, are some features more important than others? Are some hidden behind kind of advanced settings, so not to overwhelm your average user? Or all are your users essentially, as you said, power users, and they want to essentially see that's what they feed on, as much control as possible?
Yeah, so I think there's some debate around that right now, how we present these settings to the user. Historically, they've been all in a CyanogenMod settings area within the settings application. Prior to that, I think it was a separate app that actually was on the phone that controlled all of these things. Moving forward, we've talked about just trying to put more constraints around what features can make it into that settings category to provide a better user experience, and which ones, kind of get buried a little bit deeper. So I think moving forward, there's probably going to be a better balance of, here's the very easy to understand features and kind of on and off switches, and then a little bit deeper into the settings of the phone, you'll find, the very fine-grained knobs that you can tweak.
Does that mean that you're kind of expanding the reach of the user base? Like all of a sudden, CyanogenMod becomes more accessible to the average user who may not, or who may feel threatened by all these knobs? Is that one of the goals?
I mean, that sounds like a nice goal. I'm sure that it's a goal in somebody's mind. We just kind of, do things as we go.
Okay.
So, it's a tough question, yeah.
Well, fair enough. So, I mean, and this is actually one of the things we'd like to get to. Obviously, a lot of people do open source for various reasons.
Right.
And everyone, it's a community effort. There's usually no money exchanging hands. So it's a little more ad hoc. So, which is actually something I would like to get to, kind of the structure of your team. But how do you personally balance out individuals' goals? Like you may have, I don't know, you're responsible for the infrastructure. Obviously, one of your goals is to make sure that it's available and
right.
The builds are there. But as far as the features, especially if their features conflict with one another, how do you go about making that selection? Is there some voting process? Is there some sort of a community sort of outreach, or how do you incorporate that feedback from the community and as well as internal wishes into what actually gets built?
Right. I feel like there is a voting process. It's mostly kind of behind the scenes internally. Everybody gets to express their opinion, and ultimately we just go with whatever the general consensus of our group of developers is. So if everyone says, no, we don't want that feature, then we generally will say, okay, well, that's the decision we've made. So.
And do all of you have kind of equal say, or are some more equal than others? Like Steve?
Yeah, I mean, Steve, it's his baby, it's his project, so he gets the final say. But we try to be very fair about hearing out everybody's opinion, because it's important to us. I mean, we have a lot of users, so we can't just base our decisions off of what we want.
So speaking of users, how do you bring the community into this decision making? Do they propose the features? Do they ask for things? Is there some sort of an official channel through which they communicate back to you guys?
The project's gotten so large, and I've kind of lost touch with that side of it. We do have numerous people that are kind of have a foot in the door internally to the development team, and they let us know what the community's saying, and I'm sure the feedback makes its way in properly, and we evaluate it.
Okay.
But it's pretty much all, there's no, as far as I know, there's no official channel for submitting, major features. We do have an issue tracker where you can submit enhancements and things like that. And generally we'll go through and just kind of see what's there.
Okay. And so where is the community then? Like, is the community, the list of issue tracking requests, or is the community, hangs out on your, I don't know, G+ page or on the XDA forums page? I mean, where is your community? How do you actually engage them?
It's everywhere.
What are some of the,
So we have our website, and
Okay.
there's a forum there. There's previously most of our interaction was on XDA developers. We outgrew that very quickly, so now we have our own website, our own forum, our own blog. We had a huge presence on Twitter, and that but very quickly migrated over to Google+, which is, I feel like, where the community mostly kind of hangs out now.
Okay. Okay, so because when I Google things or search for things, I oftentimes come across the XDA website, on topics related to CyanogenMod projects. So I'm kind of thinking, where should I be asking these questions? Where should I be engaging people if I'm looking for help? So is it obvious to people that the kind of the Google+ and your own website is the place to be?
I feel like it is.
Okay.
XDA has just so many users and so much traffic that one thread might end up getting way off topic very quickly.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
The CyanogenMod website is specific to our ROM, so
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get a better experience there, I think.
Okay. So let's go back to features and a couple more questions, then I'll actually have some questions more in the community. So when do you know you're done? Like when do you, for example, I noticed just recently you said that the CyanogenMod 9 is kind of close to feature complete or code freeze, and you're now starting the more serious testing phases to get it to stable builds. But so how do you decide when something's done?
I don't think it's ever done.
Okay.
'Cause
But done enough for stable.
Right. So when it's done is to the point where we've all been running CyanogenMod 9 internally on our phones in a production environment, meaning we don't have to flash our phone back to stock before we go to work or we're going to have a rough day.
Okay.
I know Steve uses the term, might not be a term, but like if his mom can use the phone.
That's a very good test.
Feature complete at that point or stable enough. So it's generally, we get to the point where all of the hardware works, all the features that we want in the release are in place and working and tested, and then we call it complete. But it's, there's no real schedule behind it. It's just when it gets there, it gets there.
I know, it's done when it's done.
Yep.
I'm used to the concept from open source. But so do you, speaking of, when your mom can use it, do you all dog food CyanogenMod, kind of not just yourselves, but also within friends and family? Like, do you go out and get everyone to be using the latest and greatest and kind of give you their own honest feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a while there, I was putting CyanogenMod builds on my parents' phones and saying, if it crashes, let me know, or, just trying to get feedback from them.
Would you tell them to stay away from those advanced settings?
It's not that I have to tell them, it just kind of do. They're buried in there pretty far, but.
Fair enough. Yeah, imagine like cooking themselves on an overclocked CPU. That'd be fun.
Yep.
Okay, that's interesting. So CyanogenMod 9, what are your expectations? I mean, we're gonna have Jelly Bean announced in 2 days. When do you think? Well, I mean, yeah, you're right, maybe. So when do you think we're going to be starting to see, real builds, like, code complete builds on actual hardware? Like, I know Galaxy Tab 10.1 is, close to being fully supported. So when are we going to see that?
Soon, I hope. I mean, that's basically the only timeline I can give you. Not because I know something and I don't want to say it, but I just truly, I've been out of the loop for a while with moving here. So basically, I'll expect a text message, Gtalk message or a phone call at some point saying, hey, we're launching or releasing CM9 tonight. Make sure everything's going to be good. And that's when I'll know it's being released.
So speaking of that, let's kind of jump to you. So you manage the infrastructure. So obviously, when this happens and CM9 is out of the door, there are going to be a ton of people downloading it.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Like, what's your day-to-day job, like with respect to the CM, the community?
Right. So I make sure all the servers are running and the site's online. So my day-to-day job involves just kind of, I don't really do something every day, but usually just respond to issues. Website's slow, website's down, take a look at it. When we're in release mode, it's definitely keeping an eye on things, making sure we have enough bandwidth to cover the number of users that we're trying to serve files to. Right off the bat, no, we don't have enough bandwidth. We never do. Right. So it's always kind of a last-minute scramble to try to find some mirrors. Other companies wanting to donate bandwidth our way to help, that initial push of a couple days of extremely high traffic.
Okay, and so do you guys actually have your own hardware, or do you do cloud like Amazon or something?
Well, if we did Amazon, we'd all be broke. The project, it's open source. So I think the last numbers that I ran, it would cost us $6,000-7,000 a month to run on Amazon.
Really?
So we do have our own hardware. That is all for our build servers, and then all of the web stuff is it's all leased hardware and just data centers in various places.
And so you manage all, I'm assuming, the entire infrastructure, so everything. So let's actually jump to who supports you guys. Like, where does the funding for this come from?
So it's actually not very expensive to run the website. So that just kind of runs on its own.
Okay.
We do have a couple companies that have donated hardware to us. Bytemark is one of them. I believe they're an ISP somewhere in the UK. Should know more about them than I do. And just every once in a while, we'll have another ISP donate bandwidth to us. There's one called reflected.net that's been great. They do other mirrors, or mirror for other open source projects as well. So it's just making contacts in the community. People that use it, CyanogenMod will say, hey, I work at an ISP and we have tons of bandwidth. Do you need some? And that's generally the type of interaction that we get.
So you also then help engage these folks that do the set of the mirrors, right?
Yeah, I mean, usually we'll make a post on Google Plus if we're hurting really bad and say we need some bandwidth, and somebody, we'll get thousands of people saying, oh, I have, this unlimited Webhost account over here that you guys can use, and those we can't because they'll violate their terms of service almost immediately. But every once in a while we'll get somebody that can actually provide us with the amount of bandwidth we need.
Okay, and so obviously 2 million users, that you have today, or 2 million plus, when CM9 comes out, that's going to probably explode, I hope. Why not look at potentially some kind of ways of monetizing it to help offset some of these costs, maybe even help pay for some of your time? Obviously phones are hot. There's a lot of vested interest in reaching out to the power phone users because they tend to be influencers of others.
Right.
So, why not do something to kind of help support the community through that?
I think it tends to overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
Generally, we've always had the thought in the back of our head, oh, we could potentially monetize this somehow, but we can never agree on how and when, and giving up the time from our personal lives, the little time that we already do have to actually make that push.
But even if you you as the site owner of put a few Google ads on the
we
side
do,
or something.
and I mean it pays the bills that way.
Okay.
So.
Okay, cool. So let's kind of jump to the future. Past CM9, what are your expectations? Kind of where do you see the project going? Is it kind of more of the same? Is it on the, do you have any specific things, your specific goals that you would like to reach? How do you measure success around those goals? Like, are you trying to make it more accessible, more powerful, a better experience, differentiate it from other ROMs? What are some of the, what drives your future development?
Right. So I know Steve's biggest goal, and it's probably mine too, is to see a phone ship with CyanogenMod on it one day. So ship from the manufacturer or the carrier with CyanogenMod running on it already. Okay,
that's actually pretty cool. And so are there any, do you know if there's anything in works? I mean, you may not be able to talk about it, but are there any OEMs have expressed interest in doing that?
There's always a company here and there that stumbles across us and tries to start that conversation, but it's usually a very small manufacturer, and the conversation doesn't make it too far. I don't know if there's any talks going on right now. I'm sure there are, but it's one of those things that when we get there, we'll know it.
I see. So with Android obviously being the OS for tablets as well, and tablets don't always ship with these modems where a lot of kind of complexity comes from. I'm assuming that goal could be more easily reached than in the previous generation of Android devices.
Yeah, it could. I haven't been following the Android tablet scene. I actually gave up on Android tablets and bought an iPad a couple weeks ago.
Even though Nexus 7 is coming out in a couple of days?
Rumored. I mean, so I hear. But even then, I don't think, it's not an Android problem. Well, it is an Android problem, but it's not specific to the OS.
Okay.
There's just not many good tablet optimized apps out there. That's the last time that I tried.
That's true. That's true. So okay. So that would be the ultimate goal: having someone reach out or release a device.
Exactly.
With
yeah, not just reach out. I mean, we've had that happen, but actually have the goal.
Put it in stores, buy it from Amazon or something. Okay. Right. So speaking of that, what do you think of vendors? Like, so essentially these HTCs, Motorola, Samsungs, and whatnot. How supportive are they of this? HTC recently kind of provided a way of unlocking their bootloaders, released the kernels, whatnot. So where do you see the space? Is it more receptive to these third-party ROMs or less?
I think more recently it's moving in that direction of being more receptive. Like you said, HTC, you can unlock the bootloader now. The last time I tried to do it, it wasn't actually fully unlocked. It's kind of half unlocked, if you will. But for the most part, they try to help where they can. They're actually legally required to release the source code to the kernel because it's Linux and GPL. Some of them are really great about releasing the code very quickly. Others are not. To where I know I personally have filed a complaint. There's a mediator, I forget the name of it, where you can say so-and-so is not following the GPL, and they kind of get involved and try to start conversations with them saying, you need to release your code, and this is why. So it's kind of it's a very fine line. They don't want to release any code that's going to compromise what they believe is their intellectual property. So low-level drivers and things like that. And that's where we need the most help.
Right. So I mean, Android with this hardware abstraction layer in the user space that they have, tries to provide that easy porting of the upper layers to different hardware. So what are the main challenges that you guys have when it comes to porting new devices? Assuming that they are equivalent, like, not stock, but close to stock builds that the OEM itself provides.
Right. So the whole software interacting with hardware thing is just way above my head.
Okay.
But my understanding of it is that, yes, there is a hardware abstraction layer, but oftentimes the manufacturers just don't really use it, or they make changes to the way it's supposed to work. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge that we have there when porting new devices.
So, but do you get any support? Like if you were to kind of call up someone from HTC or Samsung, would they be receptive to helping explain how things work or helping you guys out?
I'm sure if you got the right person, they would, but I've never actually tried. I know some vendors or OEMs have worked closely with us. Samsung, I believe, I'm not sure if that's public knowledge, has sent us devices in the past. Others, the most they'll do is point us in the direction of the kernel source code if we try to ask them about anything.
But they wouldn't answer questions necessarily on how something works.
I mean, they might. I'm not sure. I just personally don't have any experience.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, what other challenges do you guys face? For example, from carriers or anything in general. Like, what if you could do one thing or a couple of things today, to get closer to the goal of running Android or CyanogenMod on a vendor-supported device and explode the number of other devices that support it, what would be those things? Like, what would you wish for?
So I think that's a tough one. I mean, more open hardware, I guess, would make it easier for us to get the software out to more people. So just more cooperation from hardware manufacturers, and it doesn't actually have to be like HTC or Motorola. There might be, some chip in the phone that's actually we need drivers for, and they might not actually come from HTC or Motorola or one of those guys. Carriers are pretty neutral to it, I would guess.
Even with phones?
Yeah, I mean, they're just getting the phone from the manufacturer and selling it.
But the fact that you enable things like tethering, for example, that kind of cuts into their revenue.
Well, yeah, but we haven't had any, I haven't heard of any, carriers making statements about custom ROMs or anything like that. If tethering is something that's enabled by using CyanogenMod and that's cutting into, the revenue for the carrier, that's more, in my opinion, the user's responsibility to not use that feature if that's violating the carrier's terms of service.
But do users ever complain that, say, their phone starts misbehaving and they bring it to a store for support, and let's say they flash the ROM, will they be kind of turned away, right, just on the fact that they're running the different ROM, or will they get any help from the carrier?
It's a good question. I don't really know the answer to that. I mean, I've never tried to take my phone into a store and say, well, this isn't working, because I've either know they're going to say, well, you're not running the stock software, so that's why.
Right.
Or I just, it's just not really, I've actually never had an issue where I've had to bring my phone into the store.
Like for hardware problem, right? Like your screen is blanking out or something, or
sound
gets
low. I've been lucky. I've never had any phones with hardware issues. But I'm sure it's happened. I don't know of any stories personally.
Okay. Okay, interesting. So speaking of issues, and I guess support, Google obviously is the main, the big, 800-pound grill in the room, and they obviously hold a lot of cards here. They are trying to make Android more kind of less fragmented by controlling it better, I guess, in the future releases. And I know in the past there were some issues with respect to distribution of their apps that you guys ended up having to kind of work around. So where do you see them today and in the future in terms of supporting not just CyanogenMod, but potentially other open source projects that kind of build on this open source Android software?
Right. I feel like their goal is, it's to have an open source operating system, and they do. And I think the fact that custom ROMs have been so successful is exactly what they were looking for. I know a lot of developers on the Android team at Google love the project and wish us all the best. But as far as working with Google, I don't know. I would hope that down the road we can come to some type of agreement where we can ship the Google apps with CyanogenMod. There would probably be a lengthy code review and testing process involved there. They're trying to maintain they want to make sure that if you have a phone with Google Play on it, it's going to work as expected.
Right.
And we introduce so many features, and we run versions of Android on phones that are not meant to support that version, that there are just too many variables right now.
So let me actually ask you, do you guys ever do CTS? Like, do you actually test your ROMs for compatibility?
Yeah, we do.
And are you green?
I'm not sure if we are right now, but I know by the time we get stable, I believe that's one of the metrics we use.
Okay.
Make sure we're passing CTS.
And do you ever have folks that provide DRM, protected content, kind of refuse to play nice with your ROMs? Like, I've never tried Netflix, for example, on my different devices. Does it work?
Probably not.
I thought so.
Yeah, they check for root, so they're not checking for CyanogenMod specifically. They're checking to see if
you have super user and SU and what.
Yeah.
So I know actually that's one of the things in CM9 that you guys are getting away from, right?
Yeah.
So you're essentially you're going to be providing a non-rooted version of it. Is that correct?
Yes. So
Okay.
and that's something that I was very glad that we moved towards. In my opinion, there's no reason for root on your phone.
Agreed.
If you want to, I'll take that back. I mean, if you're developing Android apps, it's very nice to be able to just, open up ADB on your computer and get a shell and go and look at a SQLite database file or something.
Yep.
But for the day-to-day user, I'm sure there are some features that people need root for, but me personally, I've never needed it, so I don't like the fact that it's there, because it's just one more layer of security that's missing.
Right. And I know you have a feature to manage the permissions, which can potentially break apps if they assume they're installed with particular permission, but your ROM enables them to be removed.
Yep.
So it's on one hand, it kind of adds a little extra control over security, but yeah, with rooting enabled, it can kind of bite some people, really, if they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you're just kind of, what's that? Allow, okay, there are malicious apps out there.
So in terms of, just to kind of wrap things up, your other interests or your team's other interests, like what else do you guys do? I mean, you obviously have day-to-day jobs. Are you all kind of passionate about Android and do things related to Android, or is this completely separate from what you typically do?
I think it's a pretty good mix. We have numerous people, I mean, pretty much all of us, all the developers, are software developers in our day-to-day job. And some people are, working on Android apps. Steve, works with Android at Samsung. It's a pretty good blend of people that have Android in their day-to-day job and people that don't.
And so what do you do? What pays the bills?
I'm a software developer.
Yeah.
Don't work on Android, but I work on back-end systems for an Android and iPhone app.
Cool. Well, awesome. So thank you so much. We're out of time. I'd love to continue chatting with you, but thankfully we'll have an opportunity tomorrow at the Android User Group event where Steve and the rest of your team, how many people?
I don't know if we have a head count. I mean, I'm sure we do, but it's a lot. So
it's going to be a lot. Well, the last time I checked, we had over 300 RSVPs. So hopefully it'll be one interesting event before the Google I/O. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you more tomorrow.
Sounds good.